Well, good morning, committee. I think we'll go ahead and get started. I know we, excuse me, we ran just a little late, but I think most of us are now here. This morning, we're going to have a presentation on the budgets, and I'm going to turn it over to Victoria and Meredith.
Good. Good morning, committee members. My name is Victoria Potts with Legislative Research. And on Friday, you should have received a document called Water Organizational Chart Budget Information. And so I won't read it to you because you can read it yourselves, but I would just want to point out a couple of things about it. So it's laid out in the same way as the organizational chart that we presented on Thursday. And then there's a couple of different footnotes or asterisks that I wanted to point out. So several of the agencies deal with more than just water. So take just even the first page, research and data. As you heard from the agencies such as the Forest Service and the Biological Survey, they look into things and work with things that are not water related. But we did not have enough information to pull that out. So when you're looking at their budget, so for instance, the Forest Service, $4 million, those expenditures include projects not related to water. So I just wanted to point that out. So if you see two asterisks after their name, then that means that they are involved in more than just water-related projects. And the other thing I wanted to point out, if you move down to the third page, so as you know from the water organizational chart that we talked about on Thursday, several agencies are listed in more than one place. And when we discussed budget information with Representative Highland, he asked that we list each agency's budget only once in its primary slot. So wherever the agency spends most of its budget in the category. So if you're looking at page 3, for instance, you'll see water policy. And the third one down is KDA, that's Kansas Department of Agriculture, Division of Conservation. We did list that under water policy, but they spend most of their money in water quality on the page before. So their budget is listed out under water quality, but they just mentioned under water policy. So there are several agencies that are listed in several places. And a couple of other things that I wanted to point out to you that have happened since Thursday. On Friday, you should...
May I interrupt?
Of course.
I think we had a question here, and I think this is pretty important. Representative Riley, go ahead.
Page 1, and again, I appreciated going through this and reading this, but, you know, the very top one, Forest Service, 11% state general fund. And then there is Geological Survey, state funds. Is that also the state general fund?
Sure, so that's a great question. So this information is mostly based on what the agencies provided. So I'll go look back and look at the Geological Survey, but if I remember correctly, when they talked about state funds, that could also mean funds funneled from the university that they fall under. So I'll go back and look, but for that one specifically, it could mean more than just state general fund.
So a follow-up on that, then of course the next one down, 32.2% state appropriation. So did that appropriation come from state general funds? I mean, it was just that change of terminology that was in there of what was coming from what, all funds? Or?
Sure. Again, that's what K-State called it, state appropriations. And again, I believe that one also includes money from the, well, that one has main campus allocation. Let me look into that for state funds and state appropriations. Yeah, let me look into that for you.
Would there be any other questions over just this basic chart right now to help clarify before we go forward? Seeing none, go ahead, Victoria.
Thank you. So a couple of other things that I wanted to point out while we're here. On Friday, you should have received an Excel version of our flow chart that was requested, so that you can move things around on your own if you wish, or just a different way of viewing our flow chart. This morning, you should have received a different chart that was submitted by the Kansas Water Office, the Kansas Department of Agriculture, and KDHE. They have submitted their own version of an organizational chart for your consideration. And again, you should have received that this morning. Something else you'll receive this afternoon that we just finished this morning is that contact list that was requested on Thursday. So it'll have the names and contact information for the presenters of each agency that you have heard from this session. I wanted to point out Meredith and I have been keeping a list of suggestions for the organizational flow chart, so things that were brought up on Thursday or that you might have emailed to us, and additionally, things that we will continue to discuss. Meredith and I have been keeping a list, so if you think of something outside of committee time, feel free to email us and we'll add it to the list. And the last thing I wanted to point out is it's my understanding, and Representative Orr can correct me if I'm wrong, that we will be having further discussions on the organizational chart that Meredith and I provided, as well as the one that the agency provided on Wednesday and Thursday. And on Wednesday and Thursday, I believe I'm free to share that the agencies will be online to answer your questions. So especially the Water Office, Department of Agriculture, and KDHE will be either in person or online to answer your questions during that discussion. I just wanted to share that information. And Representative Orr, I will stand for questions about anything that I presented this morning.
Thank you, Victoria. Do we have any questions here? A lot of information. There's a lot of things that, and Victoria, I just might mention, when you put this on the, what am I trying to say, the spreadsheet here to last, that really was helpful for me. I think that it kind of brought some things together that I was really missing. As Victoria said, there will be a meeting, or we'll dedicate 2 days that we're going to be discussing anything here that you want to discuss. And of course, we understand that we're trying to do some footwork here for next session. And so give this thing some serious thought, ask your questions. There's no such thing as a silly question at this point in time, that's for sure. This is very, very large and convoluted, but honestly, putting us in spreadsheets like we have, to me, is bringing some things into focus, and I can start comparing some things that I was having difficulty understanding before. Are there any questions? I see none. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to mention that there was a long article in the Wichita Eagle over the weekend having to do with the cluster of earthquakes that have been occurring in the Wichita area. And there was some comments made by the Mr. Miller, who I believe was our guest, having to do with the geological survey and the fact that the reporting on injection wells is somewhat inconsistent. There are two categories. One is the oil and gas industry, and the other is injection wells that are basically regulated, and the oversight entity is KDH&E. And they have good monthly reporting from the KDH&E injection wells, but the reporting from the oil and gas industry is a little different. It's only annual and is incomplete. So I just wanted to kind of foreshadow that as something that I think we need to be discussing when we get back to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Thank you, Victoria. Meredith, do you have some things you want to present this morning? All right. Just as a matter of discussion here a moment, as I look at these, I see a lot of confusion between federal funds and grants. Victoria, perhaps you could answer that for me. I mean, I always assumed grants were federal money, and I'm a little confused on how they separate those two, even though I realize the procedure is different. But isn't that both government money?
I'll say you're right that generally when we use the word grants, we think of federal funds, but I will say that in some cases, agencies can provide grants to something like the biological survey or the geological survey. So it's not exclusively federal funds. So there are instances where state agencies can partner with, and they call it a grant, an agency like biological or geological survey.
But the real difference here would be, and you clarify if I'm wrong, that the federal grants would be something that is annual, and we know exactly what that is, and the grants would be conditional upon receiving it or not receiving it. Would that be correct?
To be honest, I don't know if I'm comfortable making a blanket statement for every grant these agencies receive. Sorry, no, you're fine. No, it's a great question. I just wouldn't want to characterize some grants are one time and some are annual or a couple of years program. So I don't want to say that a federal grant lasts perpetually and state grants are just one time. Yeah.
While I have you here, then tell me the difference between non-federal funds as you got on a couple of these. If it's non-federal, it must mean it's not state either.
Correct, right. So one of the agencies did describe some of their grants as non-federal, so, or some of their allocations as non-federal. So that could mean state funds, or it could mean partnerships with private entities. I think they just kind of use it as a general description because they know that we like to distinguish between state funds and federal funds.
Thank you, Victoria. Anything else? I see nothing. As I told you, we'll have a presentation tomorrow from the Kansas Water Office. We'll have a presentation Wednesday on urban water issues, and then Wednesday and Thursday, we will be discussing this in general. And so these are going to be some of the questions that we kind of need to understand going into the summer. And so be giving us some thought, get yourself prepared, and you are dismissed.